Hi, this is an introduction to some features we've added to Volunteers for Salesforce for managing volunteers associated with a job. I'm sitting on a campaign record right now, and it has a number of campaign members associated with it. And you'll see that some of these are not active volunteers yet. That means they haven't been through the approval process, or they have left YJC volunteering. Now, I'm going to go to a job associated with a campaign that I've already created. You'll notice here there's a new tab called Volunteers. This tab allows you to associate a volunteer directly with a job. So let me select a volunteer, and I have some options for how I'm going to interact with that volunteer. One is that I'm going to add him to new shifts automatically. Another is that I'm going to be sending scheduling emails to Hans. And a third is that if I have created any shifts already that will occur in the future, this feature allows me to add my new volunteer to those shifts. So here is Hans's job volunteer record. And once I have Hans or a number of volunteers added to the job, if I start to create shifts, let me create a shift later in the week. And let's say it is 2 hours long. Now, if I take a look at that new shift and look at the hours, you will see it has automatically created an hours entry for Hans. It's worth looking at this status field. As our interactions with Hans progress, his status will update. So, let us start to interact with our volunteers. In order to send any information to volunteers, we have to publish our changes. At this point, we only have volunteers to invite to the process. We have no exchanges in progress. So when I publish my changes, it only gives me the option of sending invitations. Let's do that. You'll see that Hans's status updates to invited right away. And if I look at the hours record for Hans, up in the top right, you can see this confirmation status that's been created. This is an indicator of the current position of my interactions with Hans. So you'll see I sent out a request at 11:19 a.m. So let's go and see how that request looks from Hans's point of view. Here is Hans's mailbox, and it's asking him, are you available for a YJC event on the date we scheduled? And it gives him some details about the event and asks him to confirm his availability using the form here. So I follow that link. I get a form pre-filled with Hans's name and some details of the shift. And Hans has the chance to confirm or say that he's unavailable. So let us confirm for Hans. Now, if I look at the situation for the volunteer manager, if I refresh the information about volunteers, the hours here, Hans's status has updated from invited to expected. Now, suppose I need to make changes to the details of the volunteer shift. For example, suppose we need, I've forgotten in this case, to select the correct time. So say we have an event starting at 1 p.m. and and you say, sorry, I forgot to specify the correct time. And I'm going to save those changes. Again, nothing has gone to volunteers, but I do have a published status of changed. Let me publish those changes. Again, I only have the option to send to Hans, but there's a difference. Now this is identified as an update and reminder. And I have an extra option. As well as sending to Hans, I can opt to send updates immediately or simply to update a future reminder that Hans will receive. I'm going to update the message immediately. Again, my status switches to published. And if I visit Hans's hours, I can see he's still expected. I have his comment that he replied last time, but I can see a new request has gone out a minute after the last confirmation. So let's go and see how Hans is looking at this. Hans has a new item in his inbox, and it's talking about his upcoming scheduled event. And here is the message. I forgot to specify the correct time. And Hans can then come in and say, sorry, I can't make that. Excuse me. Now, if I go back to the volunteer manager's view and I refresh the hours, I find that Hans is unavailable and I need to replace Hans. So I go to my volunteer job again and I find another volunteer. So I'm going to add, let us add Sally. And I'm going to keep the same, no, I'm not. I'm going to assign her to the shift I already scheduled. Now, if I look at the shift and I look at the hours, here is Sally with no status. Now I need to publish my changes. And at this point, I have invitations again. Only Sally appears because at this point, once the volunteer, in this case Hans, is unavailable, he's not an option for publishing changes. I can reset his status manually, and we will see that later. But at the moment, he's just not an option. So here I go, and I send an invitation for Sally, who happens to have the same email address as Hans. So if I go to Sally's email, then Sally has been asked if she's available. Here's Sally's email, and she goes through the same process. Now, as volunteers respond, the manager's mailbox gets notification of their responses. So this tells me Hans first confirmed, and then he cancelled for this event. That's the basic of volunteer interactions, and I'm going to show you a few of the refinements to this picture. If you have a lot of volunteers for your event, you're going to need to schedule a lot of volunteers. The quickest way to add them is to go to the job. Go to the shift, go to the job, and add campaign members for that job. So these are all the available campaign members. It's actually a subset of everyone we associated with the campaign, because some of those volunteers, if you recall, were not approved. They weren't active volunteers. Again, I'm going to add these to to new shifts, and I'm going to add, I'm not going to add these to the shift already scheduled. So now if I look at my shift, I should still have the same 2 volunteers only. However, if I create a new shift on the job, so let's do that here. And let's say that's for the following day at 12 p.m. for 3 hours. And if I look at this new shift and the volunteer hours, all my volunteers have been scheduled. Now, if I add all the volunteers from a campaign, that may be too many volunteers. I don't actually want to have all of those volunteers participating. Perhaps initially I just want to invite 3 of them, say. So I can control that by setting the status on my volunteer hours. If I set the status to invited right away, let's do that for a couple of volunteers. Then, if I once again publish the changes for the shift, you'll see I have some additional options. I can send to the volunteers I've newly identified as invited. So this allows me to pick a subset of all the volunteers on a job and just announce the shift to those specific volunteers. And that allows me to reach out to certain volunteers, ask them if they're available, and as the answers come in, if I need new volunteers, then I can invite more of them. So I will send that invitation. And you will see that some new invitations have been sent out to Jackie and Janice. That is the basics of scheduling volunteers.